So the first thing that we're going to talk about is sustainability. And so this is a place I'm going to ask you to start talking right away. If you don't mind, you can put it in the chat. If you want to come off and talk out loud, that's great too, because I definitely want to hear other voices than mine. So the first question I would have for you is, when you think of sustainability, what comes to mind? You can put down a word, you can come off chat, you can come off mute and tell me in sentences. But for the audience who's here today, when you hear the word sustainability, what comes to mind? So people are writing in the chat: longevity, long-term financial security, how we'll manage into the future, another longevity. So often when people hear sustainability, they think of money. And while that is most of what we'll cover today, I'd like to introduce some other things about sustainability. It's really how our organization nourishes or supports its work. I encourage you to think in terms of what we need to put in place, the infrastructure, the capacity to make sustainability happen. The Google Drive, which was shared just a little bit ago, will give you access to some tools you can use later. It'll point you to some links where you could create sustainability plans. You could see other examples of people doing sustainability. Today, we're briefly going to talk about sustainability as it relates to organizational capacity, program planning, communications, and resources. So a lot of sustainability is really cross-linked. It's a thing that connects underground. So often they're just tied together, and it's a thing that we want to have in place when we start from the very beginning. One of the first things we always try to do is build upon established successes. Another is making sure that you frame your work as opportunities to draw upon the local strengths to address community needs. Oftentimes we get so stuck in what the proposal is asking us about needs in a community, we forget about the strengths-based approach in our own community. So what you're doing is looking at the things that are challenges in your community and translating as an opportunity to improve that and create community resilience. The next 2 points here are about buy-in. Another thing I'd like, if you have an opportunity to go into the chat or come off mute and talk to us out loud, I can tell that there's a lot of experts in the room. So I'd like to know how you promote buy-in and support for your projects. What are some things that you've done that have been successful? And feel free to talk to the whole group. There were other comments on sustainability, having a process to keep an organization going, paying a fair wage, letting work be driven by communities being served. Any other thoughts about how you promote buy-in and support for your project? I think a lot of you all do this naturally, honestly. It's really about involving community in decision-making, making sure folks can see what you're doing and that you're working with them to create whatever project or program that you are doing. People want to understand that you're listening to them and that you're moving things forward. There's a lot more that we'll talk about related to this. We're going to talk about organizational capacity throughout the presentation as it relates to sustainability, program development, and pitch. For now, I'm just going to touch on a few things, and we'll go into more detail about evaluation and budgeting later. Project sustainability starts at the point you apply for the monies. One of the things you probably did was choose strategies that align with the organization's priorities and missions. There are so many reasons that's key. It ensures you have capable, experienced staff who understand local solutions, that your organization is connected to the community that you're serving through a thriving network. It's also important that your proposed work builds upon your successes and you build yourself up to continue those successes. Some things to consider in doing that is creating a training component as part of your application, using the monies to obtain technical assistance to address organizational gaps, or you might consider hiring staff who have new or different skills than what currently exists. Another component that we often see is having a work group that works on sustainability alone. We're going to spend a minute discussing organizational capacity as a lead into the tool called the logic model. So I have popped up in front of you something that looks super complicated, but actually you all have really done some things that have started to fill this in. I'd like to introduce you to, for some of you folks, I would like to introduce you to something called a logic model. It's a tool you can use for sustainability, program planning, proposal development. You can use it for evaluation. We don't have much time today, so I'm going to go over it briefly now and then discuss it a little bit later about how you can use it to write grant proposals. So the first thing we've already done is I asked you some of the challenges in your community. So in this case, in the logic model, it's listed as issues, but the idea is what are some of the things that you're going into and what are some of the opportunities that you're going to address? You talked about food insecurity, workforce, you talked about COVID-19, vaccinations. Those are the things that started. So what you always want to know is, hey, what is it that we're trying to address? And then secondarily, I'm going to have you swing your eyes all the way to the right. On the right, so if you know your challenges, say food security, then to the right, often you want to think about, so how are we fixing food security? A super simple thing that might drive you crazy is the challenge is food insecurity. So my goal is to decrease food insecurity. It can be as simple as that when you think about the logic model and the things that you're trying to do. Then the other thing is what we just went through when I asked you to talk about your organizational capacity. This next column here is called inputs. It's basically what are we investing into what we're trying to change. So how are we getting to the goals? So very first thing, what are we investing? So it can be any of these things that are listed: people, time, money, materials. A lot of the times the money is the proposal itself when you're looking to get the money from that. But people can be, some of you all wrote community health workers. It can be the staff that you have on board. It can be the volunteers. And also it's the community in which you serve itself. These are some of the things called inputs. The next part is really, who are we focusing on? And so here's your focus audience or your populations. It's who do we reach? And so in some cases, when I asked you what are some of the challenges and therefore the opportunities within your communities, the next thing is, who is it specifically that you're working with or for to address those issues? And so this is the next thing that you would write in here. It could be any population. For me, I try to get as specific as possible. Sometimes it's within a neighborhood. Sometimes it's within an age range. Sometimes it's a race and ethnicity. Part of it will be defined by, one, what your project is, but part of it will also be defined by what the funding asks you for. The next thing is really something you're doing naturally, right? So I asked you in some of your capacity, what you all started listing the activities that you were doing, and that's perfect. So we're going to reach these audiences, and these are the things we're going to do. So if we have access to inputs, then what are we going to do with them? And so some of you all listed some of the things you do. The next thing that they ask is, hey, if you do that certain activity, you have community health workers do outreach, then what's going to happen because of that? And so these are the widgets, right? These are the very first things we think about in evaluation. They're really the simplest part of evaluation. We might name the number of participants we're going to do, the number of classes. If your community health workers do home visits, how many visits that they did. It could be that you did a certain amount of social determinants of health screening or referrals. This right part that's in here is more the evaluation component, and we're not going to go in it in depth right now. However, in the Google Drive that you have a blank copy of this that you could use later if you'd like to walk through. Are there any questions? You can put it in the chat or come off mute. I see a chat. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. So really, one of the things I would like to think about with you all, especially with the skills that you have, is how do you think communications relate to sustainability? You can chat with us with the group, or you can go into chat. I'd like to hear your ideas about how communications relates to sustainability. These are examples of communications, but how do you think it relates to sustainability? It builds a network, gains community leadership and buy-in. Say more. The person who wrote it builds a network. Do you mind coming off mute and telling me a little more about what you mean when you say that?
So it builds a direct connection to the community. It creates a network where there's also like word of mouth of what's going on. And so it also creates a common goal or a common group with a common need.
Nice, thank you so much. And then someone wrote, creates accountability due to direct connection with the community. Can you, if you don't mind, would you mind telling us a little bit more about what that means for you? I'm guessing that no, you don't want to tell us. I'm looking at your face. It's okay not to come off mute. That's okay. I just like to hear other people's voices and have them tell us more about what you mean.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Sorry, we have two computers in the same room. Mute me. Let me unmute mine and then we'll get. Sorry. I just feel like you hold yourself accountable as an organization to keep going to whatever work you're doing, and builds the communication with the community so that you keep track of what you're doing in paper and also as a network.
Thank you. You all are making really good points. Really, sustainability is about people understanding and buying into what you're doing so that they will support you as you move forward, and also give you feedback about what would work better.